Hello there, folks. Thanks once again for joining. Now that we've got a little bit of an understanding of what problem cloud is solving, let's actually go ahead and define it. So what we'll talk about is technology on tap, a common phrase that you might have heard about when talking about cloud. What is it and why would we say that? Then what we're actually going to do is walk through the NIST definition of cloud. So there are 5 key properties that the National Institute of Standards and Technology does use to determine whether or not something is cloud. So we'll walk through that so we've got a good understanding of what cloud is and what cloud is not. So first things first, technology on tap. Why would we refer to cloud as technology on tap? Well, let's have a think about the taps we do know about. When you want access to water, if you're lucky enough to have access to a nice and easy supply of water, all you really need to do is turn on your tap and get access to as little or as much water as you want. You can turn that on and off as you require. Now we know that that's easy for us. All we have to worry about is the tap and paying the bill for the amount of water that we consume. But what we don't really have to worry about is everything that goes in behind the scenes. So the treatment of the water to bring it up to drinking standards, the actual storage of that treated water, and then the transportation of that through the piping network to actually get to our tap. All of that is managed for us. We don't need to really worry about what happens behind the scenes. All we do is focus on that tap. We turn it on if we want more. We turn it off when we are finished. We only pay for what we consume. So you might be able to see where I'm going with this. This is exactly what we are talking about with cloud. With cloud, however, it's not water that we're getting access to, it is technology. So if we want access to technology, we use the cloud, we push some buttons, we click on an interface, we use whatever tool we require, and we get access to those servers, that storage, that database, whatever it might be that we require in the cloud. Now again, behind the scenes, we don't have to worry about the data centers that host all of this technology, all of these services that we want access to. We don't worry about the physical infrastructure, the hosting infrastructure, the storage, all the different bits and pieces that actually get that technology to us. We don't need to worry about. And how does it get to us? How is it available all across the globe? Well, we don't need to worry about that connectivity and delivery as well. All of this behind the scenes when we use cloud is managed for us. All we have to worry about is turning on or off services as we require. And this is why you can hear cloud being referred to as technology on tap, because it is very similar to the water utility service. Utility service is another name you might hear cloud being referred to, because it's like water or electricity. Cloud are like these utility services where you don't have to worry about all the infrastructure behind the scenes. You just worry about the thing that you want access to. And really importantly, you only have to pay for what you use. You turn it on if you need it, you turn it on if you don't, you create things when you need them, delete them when you don't, and you only pay for those services when you have them, even though they are constantly available at your fingertips. Now compare this to the scenario we walked through earlier. Traditionally, we would have to buy all of the infrastructure, have it sitting there idly. Even if we weren't using it, we would still have had to pay for it, set it up, power it, and keep it all running. So this is a high level of what we are talking about with cloud. Easy access to servers when you need them, turn them off when you don't. Don't worry about all that infrastructure behind the scenes. But that's a high level definition. So let's now walk through what the NIST use as the key properties to define cloud. One of the first properties you can use to understand whether something is or is not cloud is understanding whether or not it provides you on-demand self-service access, where you can easily go ahead, get that technology without even having to talk to humans. So what do I really mean by that? Well, let's say you're a cloud administrator. You want to go ahead and access some resources in the cloud. Now, if you do want access to some services, some data, some storage, an application, whatever it might be, well, you're probably going to have some sort of admin interface that you can use, whether that's a command line tool or some sort of graphical user interface. You can easily use that to turn on any of the services that you need. Web applications, data, storage, compute, and much, much more. And you don't have to go ahead, talk to another human, procure all of the infrastructure that runs behind the scenes. You use your tool, it is self-service, it is on demand, create it when you want it, delete it when you don't. So that's on-demand self-service access and one of the key properties of the cloud. Next, what I want to talk to you about is broad network access. Now, this is where we're just saying if something is cloud, it should be easy for you to access through standard capabilities. So for example, if we are the cloud administrator, it's pretty common when you're working with technology to expect that you would have command line tools, web-based tools, and so on. But even when we're not talking about cloud administrators and we're actually talking about the end users, maybe for example, accessing storage, it should be easy for them to do so through standard tools as well, such as a desktop application, a web browser, or something similar. Or maybe you've gone ahead and deployed a reporting solution in the cloud, like we spoke of in the previous lesson. Well, you would commonly expect for that sort of solution that maybe there's also a mobile application to go and access all of that reporting data. The key point here is that if you are using cloud, it is expected that all of the common standard sorts of accessibility options are available to you. Public access, private access, desktop applications, mobile applications, and so on. So if that's what cloud is and how we access it, where actually is it? That's a really important part of the definition of cloud. And that's where we're referring to resource pooling. This idea that you don't really know exactly where the cloud is that you are going to access. So let's say, for example, you've got your Aussie Mart company. If they want to deploy their solution to be available across the globe, well, it should be pretty easy for them to actually go ahead and do that. Now, we don't know necessarily where that is. We can get access to it. We might say, I want my solution available in Australia East, for example, or Europe, or India, or maybe Central US, for example. All of these refer to general locations where we want to deploy our services. When you use cloud, you are not going to go ahead and say, I want one server and I want it deployed to the data center at 123 Data Center Street. Okay, you don't know the physical address exactly, or at least you shouldn't really have to. All you need to know about is generally where you are going to go and deploy that. Now, you will also see that for most cloud providers, you've got that global access in terms of all the different locations you can deploy to. And really importantly, in terms of all of these pooled resources, understand that it's not just for you to use. There will be other customers all across the globe who are using that as well. So when you're using cloud, there are lots of resources. They might be in lots of different physical locations and lots of different physical infrastructure and in use by lots of different customers. And you don't really need to worry about that or know too much about it. Another really important property of the cloud is something referred to as rapid elasticity. Now, elasticity is the idea that you can easily get access to more or less resources. And when you work with cloud, you're actually going to commonly hear this being referred to as scaling out and in rather than just scaling up and down. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's say we've got our users that need to access our Aussie Mart store. We might decide to use cloud to host our Aussie Mart web application, and perhaps that's hosted on a server and a database. Now, when that application gets really busy, for example, if we have lots of different users going to access it at the same time, we might want to scale out to meet demand. That is to say, rather than having one server that hosts our web application, we might actually have 3. And if that demand for our application decreases, we might actually go ahead and decrease the underlying resources that power it as well. What we are talking about here is scaling in and out by adding or decreasing the number of resources that host our application. This is different from the traditional approach to scalability, where what we would normally do is just add CPU or add memory, for example. We would increase the size of one individual resource that was hosting our solution. So that's just elasticity at a high level, and it's a really key property of cloud. Now, we'll just say here that if you are worried about how that actually works behind the scenes in terms of how you host that application across duplicate resources, how you provide connectivity to that, that's all outside the scope of this beginner's course, but is definitely covered in other content as well. So when you're using cloud, you get easy access to scale in and out, and you should never feel like there are not enough resources to meet your demand. To you, it should just feel like if you want 100 servers, for example, then you can easily get 100 servers. All right, now the last property of cloud that I want to talk to you about is that of measuring service. When we're talking about measuring service, what we're talking about is the idea that if you are using cloud to host your solutions, it should be really easy for you to go and say, I know what this is costing, I know where my resources are, how they are performing, and whether there are any issues, and I can control the types of resources and the configuration that I use that I'm going to deploy. So for example, it should be easy for you to say, how much is it going to cost me for 5 gigabytes of storage? What does my bill look like currently, and what am I forecasted to be using over the remainder of the month? Or maybe you want to say that certain services should not be allowed to be deployed across all regions. Yes, cloud can be accessed across the globe, but maybe your organization only works in one part of a specific country, and that's the only location you should be able to use. These are the standard notions of measuring and controlling service, and it's really common to all of the cloud providers. All right, everybody, so now you've got an understanding of what cloud is and how you can define it. If you'd like to see more about this definition from the NIST, then be sure to check out the link that I've included for this lesson. So thanks for joining me, folks. I'll see you in the next lesson.